You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
As a chef, I know flavor doesn't begin in the kitchen. It begins on the land. And Westhome's nature-led Australian Wagyu is a story written in the landscape of Northern Australia. Cooking is storytelling, and Westhome Wagyu carries a story of Northern Australia itself, raw, powerful, and deeply authentic. It's a testament to the passion and care raised in the rhythm of Northern Australia. I'm Chef Maylin from 88 Club in Los Angeles, and I invite you to visit westhome.com/Maylin to learn more and taste a story only Westhome nature-led Australian Wagyu can tell. That's westhome.com/MEILIN.
Hey everybody, welcome to your 30-second laughing session brought to you by The Laughing Cow. Ready to laugh? In 3, 2, 1, and... Okay! Great job, everybody! Now unpeel a wedge of The Laughing Cow light spreadable cheese, a delicious snack with 2 grams of protein and 25 calories per wedge. Feels good to have a cow, huh?
This episode is brought to you by our Patreon members. Thank you so much.
Join our Patreon for extra episodes, interviews, extra content, and to help support the podcast and help us continue to do the work we do.
Go to patreon.com/ancienthistoryfangirl to learn more.
They should be afraid of us and our voting power, but we have to understand what the stakes are.
I'm Jenny Williamson.
And I'm Jen McMenemy.
And this is Ancient History Fangirl Podcast Takeover. We decided to take a break from our usual ancient history episodes, the 7 Wonders of the Ancient World, our book club, to talk to you about something extremely important that we all need to know about, which is Project 2025. This is a takeover. We're dedicating the month of August to Project 2025 and its threat to our democracy and to all of us.
And to tell us about this, we've invited none other than internationally best-selling contemporary historical romance and upcoming romantic fantasy author Emily Rath onto the podcast. In addition to being an internationally best-selling romance author, Dr. Emily Rath holds a PhD in political science and peace studies. Welcome, Emily.
Welcome.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. So we wanted to invite you onto the podcast after we watched some of your absolutely excellent informational videos on your Instagram about Project 2025. And we discussed this and decided that basically not enough people know about this, or if they do, they might think it's so extreme that it just should be dismissed and ignored, and maybe the progressives are overreacting to something, right? We thought we'd lend our platform to talking about it with experts and telling as many people as possible about why you should be concerned. So tell us a little bit about your background and why you are uniquely qualified to talk to us about this issue.
Yeah, it is kind of strange if you think of why is this hockey romance author launching a campaign to talk about these things, but it really is so important. Like you said, it is so important that it's I am a romance author, but I'm also a person. I'm also a citizen of the United States, and I am not only fearing for my job, right? If you want me to write these romance novels, I have to be free to do that. And so it's not just about the future of my job that I feel like is directly, immediately at stake, but my life as a queer person, not only living here in the United States, but living in the state of Florida. So, I feel like I have an urgent want for people to understand what is going on. And I have a platform where when you think about what's at stake with the next election, I think one of the biggest deciding votes of this upcoming election is going to be the white woman vote. And as a romance author, we are in a position, romance authors, we have a platform to speak directly to white women, right? And tell them what is happening, what is at stake. Not everyone's involved in politics. Not everyone knows the issues, or like you said, they can feel like, oh, that's crazy, right? How many times I've gotten that, Emily, that's crazy. No, it's not. It's already happening here in the state of Florida. It's already happening. I was a university professor while they were rolling out the exact kind of legislation they want to roll out further with Project 2025. They've already done it here in my state. The Stop Woke Act, the Don't Say Gay bills that they've already passed here in Florida. So for me, it feels like I've just been in this position of I was directly experiencing it as a professor. It was impacting my job. It was impacting what I could teach and how I could teach it. The idea that we're not allowed to talk about race and racism. We're not allowed to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion in our coursework. How do I do that as someone who's teaching African politics, politics of genocide? How do I teach about genocide without teaching about racism? How is that a thing? Right? I was having to go to my department chair, and he was telling me I had to remove those words strategically from my syllabuses so that I wouldn't get fired. Right? So when you're talking about me being in a position to feel like I have something to say about this, right? It has impacted my work already here in the state of Florida. It was one of the reasons I left teaching. What am I supposed to do at a public university if I'm not allowed to talk about racism in an African politics class, right? Or if the threat is always going to loom over me that you're going to fire me because I am talking about racism in an African politics class. It's madness.
It's absolutely terrifying. And the fact that it's already happening is something that I think a lot of people don't realize if they don't happen to live in Florida, for example. I mean, Florida is like ground zero for a lot of this stuff. And just the idea that, like, yes, it's already happening, and yes, it can absolutely happen throughout the country is something that everybody needs to know about.
I'm absolutely like, you can't see me because it's a podcast, but my mouth has just been open. I'm floored. It's just, it's such a disparity of how you educate people when you're not allowed to actually talk about the issues that happened. You're not allowed to use the words to explain racism and everything else that happened, the colonialism in African politics. Like, I didn't know it was that bad. Like, I knew it was bad, but I did not know it was that bad.
It wasn't to the point where they were outright stopping me from teaching it. At the point when I was still in, and right now it's been time, like a couple of years have passed, but it was to the point where for my safety, right? Because my department is like, we want you here. We want you here. The students want you here. The students want you teaching these subjects, but we got to protect you. And so let's just take it out of the syllabus. If it's not in there, even if you're teaching it, keep teaching it, but take it out of your syllabus, the ones that we have to submit to the state, right? And so it's just like, my gosh. So now I'm I felt so gross. I felt so gross as I had to sit at my desk. I remember that morning sitting at my desk and taking those words out of my syllabuses as if I'm not going to teach these subjects. I felt complicit, but it's like, it's protecting me. It's protecting my students, but I felt complicit in this erasure. And it was awful. It was one of the worst days on my job.
Like, that is a workaround that people can do, but it also puts you at the mercy of anybody who finds out, who doesn't like what you're actually teaching in the classroom and can report you. So it's not like a total solution.
Yeah, no, it was not a solution. It was a stopgap. It was a, let's do this for now to protect you. Because I was going up for tenure. So the very real fear, the question that I kept asking and no one had a good answer for me was, am I going to get tenure here? Am I going to get tenure? Why would you tenure me to teach the things that, I mean, I could say the other side of me is, one of my other specialties is climate change. I have published in the area of climate change adaptation and mitigation strategies. So it's like, okay, I am this queer person that does women's rights. That's the core of my research, was about women's rights, right? So I'm doing women's rights and justice, women in politics, climate change politics, race and racism, genocide. Like, I am their worst nightmare, So, am I going to get here? And they're like, I don't have an answer. And it's like, awesome. I'm glad I've worked for 15 years to get to this point, and I'm happy here. I love where I live in Florida. I want to stay here. I like where I'm living, but the politics within my job and within the state are making it feel like I'm not welcome here. It's not safe here in the United States, right? United States.
It's unbelievable that it's come to this, and it's unbelievable that it can get worse, but it can get worse.
Yes, absolutely, it can get worse. That's why I feel like I could not stay silent another second. Not that I've been silent. I've been talking about a lot of this stuff for a while, but I really kind of went all the way in. like I can't stay silent. I can't. White women have to wake up. They have to understand what's happening. They have to vote. We have so much power. We have to vote.
Yeah, it was Emily's series on Instagram. I think it was probably also on TikTok. But it was Emily's series that really inspired us to use our platform, because I didn't know a lot about what was going on. But some of the stuff Emily was talking about, I said to Jenny, I was like, does that mean like some of our podcasts about queer history or genocide or things like that could be considered like pornography or pulled from the public catalog? Is that where we're going with this? And it was really scary.
We're also queer women, and we have done a lot of work on queer history and gender topics in ancient history, and we both want to write novels that have queer romance in them. So this affects us too from that angle, as well as many other angles.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's start from the beginning here. What is the Heritage Foundation?
Yeah. So, the Heritage Foundation, they're a think tank. They're a conservative think tank. They started in the 70s, I believe. They really kind of had their heyday, right? The most glorious moment for them was the Reagan administration. That's when they really started to roll out and kind of figure out what they were as a think tank, what their mission was going to be. They do a lot in terms of policy planning. They've been very involved in things like foreign policy. And then this campaign that they have been doing, the mandate for leadership. I know that will come up in a question here in a minute, but the idea of every 4 years we have these presidential transitions. And what has historically been the case in the United States is it's either the candidate wins a second term and then it flops, or it hasn't been as common that we've had these one-term presidents. A lot of times these presidents are going for 2 terms, but then it flops. So it's Republican, Democrat, right? And so what the Heritage Foundation has done is when you have these massive overhauls of a new presidency coming into power, you're talking about thousands of people that have to basically be removed from their positions and new people put into positions across all the different departments. There's so many departments of the federal government that have political appointee aspects to them, right? And so one of the big things the Heritage Foundation did was like, let's help you do some of that planning. Let's help you do some of that transition work, because it's a big job. And for most cases, presidential candidates are so consumed with their election that then you win. And like, that's what we saw in 2016 with the Trump administration. He wins, and you could tell, and he admitted openly, I did not expect to win, right? And they were completely unprepared. They were not prepared. And so what they were able to do is fall back on the Heritage Administration or the Heritage Foundation, who says, we've got a list ready for you. You want a list of candidates that you could put into Department of Transportation, Department of Education. Like, that's how we got Betsy DeVos. She was literally on their list of approved candidates that they could consider for Department of Education, right? And so that's one of the big things that they've done is prepare this basically transition handbook of like, look, there's a lot of moving wheels here in the first 100 days of a new presidency. Let us help you get started. Here's policies, here's people that you can put into place to get this ball rolling, right? And so that's what they have been doing strategically, is building out that for decades now.
And with specifically their own agenda in mind.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Their specific policy ideas and recommendations in mind. Yes.
Is there a baby in your life who's about to start solid foods? This can be such a confusing and stressful time. As a mom of 7, I really struggled with spoon feeding my oldest baby. But once I realized that babies can safely feed themselves real, wholesome foods using the principles of baby-led weaning, feeding the rest of my babies became an actually enjoyable experience instead of something that I used to dread. Hi, I'm Katie Ferraro, college nutrition professor and dietitian specializing in baby-led weaning, and I host the Baby-Led Weaning Made Easy podcast. Each week, we cover evidence-based, safe infant feeding practices for parents and caregivers of babies who are 6 to 12 months of age. So, if you're confused by all the conflicting info you hear about starting solid foods, or you want easy, actionable tips on how to safely prep food for your baby, or introduce allergenic foods, or figure out when to drop a milk feed, we cover all that and more, plus interviews with the world's leading feeding experts in 2 new episodes each week. Search Baby-Led Weaning wherever you listen to podcasts, and happy feeding.
No one hates history, they just haven't found the right teacher yet. Or in this case, a nerdy best friend who loves to tell you all about world history, women's history, and weird history. Hi, I'm TK, the creator of For the Love of History podcast, a place for people who want to learn more but don't know where to start, and history lovers who want to break from the mainstream. From rat trials to warrior women, we cover topics from every country and era. Whether you're a history expert or just starting out, there's a place for you here in the Time Machine. So join me every Friday on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube for a brand new topic. See you there. Bye.
Throughout history, royals across the world were notorious for incest. They married their own relatives in order to consolidate power and keep their blood blue. But they were oblivious to the havoc all this inbreeding was having on the health of their offspring. From Egyptian pharaohs marrying their own sisters to the Habsburgs' notoriously oversized lower jaws. I explore the most shocking incestuous relationships and tragically inbred individuals in royal history. And that's just episode 1. On the History Tea Time podcast, I profile remarkable queens and LGBTQ+ royals, explore royal family trees, and delve into women's medical history and other fascinating topics. I'm Lindsay Holiday, and I'm spilling the tea on history. Join me every Tuesday for new episodes of the History Tea Time podcast, wherever fine podcasts are enjoyed.
When we talk about Project 2025, what is that? What do we mean by that?
Yes. So this is basically the 2025 version of this thing that I just said. So it's called the 2025 Presidential Transition Project. And so what they've done is they've put together, the Heritage Foundation is just one of the organizations that's been partnering with this. But what they've been doing is building up this momentum. I heard someone brilliantly talking about this idea of like, if you think 2025 is the launch point, as if 2025 is when this will start, you're kidding yourself, right? 2025 is when it culminates, when it comes together, because they have already been laying the groundwork for all of these policies, as we've already mentioned, at the state level and even at the federal level. Trump did a lot to lay the groundwork for expanding the 2025 policy with like his Schedule F, right? Schedule F is this idea that he's going to take all of these positions, thousands of positions across the federal government, and turn them into political appointee positions, right? So he would basically gut the federal government of thousands of bureaucratic positions, right? So these are meant to be apolitical. Whatever president is in power, I just work for the Department of Tax and Revenue, right? They're going to transition them into political appointee positions. So now it's, are you loyal to the Heritage Foundation? Are you loyal to the Republican Party? Are you loyal to Trump? You're not going to get that job unless you are. And then you see how the power of the federal government can get consolidated under whoever that person is that would fall into the presidency. So the idea that 2025 is going to like click our fingers, start, that's not what's happening. It's the culmination. It's the coming together of all of these threads that have been woven across the states and across the federal government for decades that they will push forward in 2025 even harder. Does that making sense?
Yeah, it's like laying the foundation for a dictatorship where the apparatus of the federal government is loyal to one person and one party instead of the government itself.
It sounds to me like the foundation is already there.
Oh, it's already, they've been laying it, packing the Supreme Court the way that he did. He very strategically, the Heritage Foundation very strategically wanted the specific people that were put forward for those Supreme Court seats, right? The fact that we had the overturning of Roe v. Wade, all of these pieces have been building, like I said, for decades.
Yeah, I remember reading an article about like essentially all of the local judges in different local positions, local as in statewide, that during Trump's administration were sort of like he was able to put in charge. And a lot of that has been about laying this foundation for this 2025 project, which is, you know, if you think about it, that was almost 10 years ago that he was first president. So now we're going to be dealing with the repercussions of that going forward.
What is the mandate for leadership and what is its message?
Yeah. So the mandate for leadership is, if you think of Project 2025 as like the overhauling like plan, like this is our plan of action. The mandate for leadership is essentially the manifesto, right? Like this is where we're going to actually write it down. And so I should say the Heritage Foundation has prepared a mandate for leadership for every presidential election, like I mentioned, since Reagan, right? So Reagan handed one to Reagan, and Reagan really used it as a tool book. He used it as a policy book. He was, I wanted like religious, like pun intended. He was religious about his use of this Christian conservative playbook for foreign policy, for domestic policy. He really went hand in hand with what the Heritage Foundation wanted and moved that forward. And so even during the Trump administration, right, in 2016, by his own admission, he was given the volume that they gave him. I believe it was like volume 7. So they gave him his version of the mandate for leadership. And by his own admission, his administration enacted over 2/3 of the policy recommendations in that version of the mandate. So that's where people are like, oh, come on, like it's the Heritage Foundation. It's not Trump, or, you know, like it doesn't mean that just because Trump gets elected, he's going to do any of the things that this mandate for leadership calls for. And it's like, okay, fine, I take your point, but we have past record that he did hand in hand with them. By his own admission, he believed in the values of what they were pushing, and he enacted 2/3 of the policy recommendations then. So we can only assume, given the fact that almost every single person currently involved in the Project 2025 program is a former Trump administration person, the writing feels like it's on the wall, that it's going to happen. If he is elected, he is going to pick up that mandate for leadership. Now it's version 9, and he is going to run with it.
What are the core promises of Project 2025? Like, if this has been implemented, like some version of this for decades now, is this Project 2025 especially scary?
It is like, I mean, you had already mentioned this idea of like, the goal with Project 2025 is to fundamentally reshape the way our federal government looks and operates, right? It is really meant to consolidate as much power as possible into the executive branch. And because of the way they interpret Article 2 of the Constitution, they see this idea of the executive branch, the whole of the executive branch is under the direct control of the president, right? It's a very specific theory. It's a way that they're interpreting the Constitution, right? That political scientists have debated endlessly, right? But the idea here is that we are going to fundamentally restructure the whole of the federal government. We are going to abolish entire wings of the federal government. We are going to take the other wings that exist, and we are going to change out the personnel, right? So it's things like Schedule F. So we are going to turn them in to political appointees. And then all of it will be concentrated under the executive branch. So we will essentially be turning the government from a democracy into a Christian nationalist autocracy under the Republican president, who they believe is going to be Donald Trump.
This is chilling. It is chilling and terrifying. And I wanted to zero in because so many people are affected by what is in Project 2025. But I wanted to zero in for a minute on queer people. What does Project 2025 say about queer people?
So one of the biggest groups within the queer community that has been the target, and again, like we said, this has been going on for decades. One of the biggest targets within this is the transgender community, right? The Republican Party for a number of election cycles now has really set up trans rights and trans healthcare as this boogeyman, right? That the whole of the country ought to be afraid of. In previous election cycles, they were setting up this idea of the Republicans should fear their children going to schools with trans kids who are going to attack them in the bathroom. The amount of times this mentions, or people associated with Project 2025 have gone on and done public interviews where they're mentioning their fear of drag queens. Oh my God. You would think that like drag queens in libraries is the single biggest threat to children in this country. right? It's not. We could talk about that if we wanted to.
I just an active shooter drill that my niece had to do from kindergarten onwards.
Right. And so they really centered this. So there's a lot of talk in Mandate for Leadership in particular about transgenderism. They basically have tried to turn it into like a psychosis, right? Of like the transgenderism that's plaguing our society. And they basically link transgenderism. They don't really define what they mean by it, but they link it directly to pornography. And they link it directly to, it's like anything that has to do with transgenderism is by nature of its obscenity, right? Because that's one of the terms they use. It is obscene to be transgender. Anything related to it by nature of its obscenity is pornography. So that's where they're saying a drag queen doing a story hour in a library, that is pornography by their definition. And so they're saying we have to protect these children. We have to protect family values. And we have to protect them from the scourge of transgenderism. And so not only are they going after transgender people just for existing in the bodies that they have in public spaces, right? But then there's also a whole nother wing of it that's going into healthcare restrictions. So there's going to be a complete, not just a gutting of gender affirming care, right? And we should be very clear, it is not just transgender people that use gender affirming care. I have a number of my friends as women that use gender affirming care, things like hormone replacement, right? Estrogen replacement. Like it is not just transgender people that use gender affirming medical care, right? They want to not only gut that completely, but they want to actually enact policies that any healthcare professionals or health insurance professionals that provide care will be prosecuted, right? We're going to sue you for daring to think that you're going to provide this care to transgender people or anyone that is getting gender affirming care. So that's kind of like the trans element of it here, that it's going to just be completely awful, right? Completely awful, dehumanizing, taking away civil liberties, taking away healthcare access. Then if we look broader at the LGBT community, and I think it's important, not just the LGBT community, but also single mothers. Single mothers are mentioned by name in the Mandate for Leadership. The idea that according to the Heritage Foundation, the only justifiable form of a family unit is a married mother and father and their children. We should also add to that the father is to work and the mother is to not. So again, if we're looking at what's the concern for me in my household, I bring home the bacon. I am the working parent. My husband is retired, right? And so he's like, what does this say for me? Who am I supposed to be in this new world order? I don't want to work. I don't have to because my wife makes the money, right? But we are an abomination because he is not working. I am working. Right. And so they not only are going to take away the validation of non-heterosexual marriages and relationships, they're going to also take away the ability to build and have a family. So they're doing all kinds of things in terms of blocking IVF and blocking other forms of healthcare related to getting pregnant, and then limiting the ability of non-heterosexual couples to form a family unit.
So does that mean rolling back, for example, the right for gay people to get married?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you can even see someone like, I watched an interview recently. It was like Candace Owens, right? And she was talking to Don Lemon, right? Don Lemon, who's married to a man. And he was like, so you think I'm sinning? You think, this is an abomination? Like I'm married to a man. And she's like, you were in a sinful relationship with a man. I do not believe marriage can exist between two men. You're not married, right? She said that to his face. And he's just like, all right. Even though he is legally married to a man, it's like, no, you're not. You literally do not exist in that form to me. Whatever law you think is going to protect you as a married couple, I do not recognize it. I do not see you as married. It's an abomination. It's a sin. The only valid family unit. And like single mothers, beware. Women that have been divorced, beware. Women thinking of getting divorced, beware, because they're coming after that too. You know, literally, you can go and watch JD Vance. He has talked about this publicly. He does not believe no-fault divorce should be a thing, because otherwise women are just walking around changing marriages like they change shoes. Literally said that.
He said that, yeah. And he said specifically that women should stay in violent relationships.
Yes, because otherwise, work it out. If we just have this opportunity to do a no-fault divorce, then we're not even trying.
And this is specifically targets women because divorces are initiated 70% of the time. It's women who initiate divorce. So this is if they don't mention men or women, this sounds like gender neutral, but it's not. It's about entrapping women.
And as someone who's been separated from their husband for over a year now, I'm not divorced. We're just literally not in the same country and have a lot going on. The idea that a woman would initiate a divorce, like changing their shoes, is so condescending and so offensive to me in ways I cannot even express to you. Divorce is a very long process. It's a very legal and complicated process. It just boggles the mind that there is any woman out there who could possibly think that these laws are going to benefit them in any way, shape, or form. And in addition to, I just want to jump onto what Emily said about gender affirming care and also reproductive care. My mother is 67. She's on Medicaid, and she has an IUD because of some health issues. She had to have it removed, and Medicaid refused to cover that, or Medicare refused to cover it because they said, we're not covering anything related to reproductive health. My mom is 67. She's not going to have any more children. Not everyone who's getting this care, and this is where I'm going with this, is necessarily having it for the same reasons you think. And it should all be covered because it's all to do with your body and your choice and the autonomy that I thought conservatives cared about, which was that you have the choice over what happens to your body, not the government.
They don't care about that.
Of course not, especially not if you're a woman or a queer person.
The more you you keep peeling back these layers, to say nothing, we haven't even mentioned what they want to do in terms of rolling back federal protections for anti-discrimination against sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression in the workplace, right? Haven't even mentioned that yet. Completely rolling that back, completely rolling back all diversity, equity, and inclusion programming, rolling back affirmative action, right? So it's you just go through and you look at every single level. Let's look at what they want to do to women in terms of healthcare. Look at what they want to do in terms of family law, right? Do I have a right to get divorced? Do I have a right to contraception? Do I have a right to decide where my kids are going to school? Do I have access to affordable schooling? Just keep going up the list. And it's for any woman at this point, any woman in this country to be I'm voting Republican. I'm you are voting your rights away. You're literally voting your rights away. This is madness. Have you read this? Do you know what they're already doing? What they've already done to us at the state level? 14 states have completely banned abortion, total ban on abortion, and the number is growing. They are putting us in a box. There have even been members of Project 2025 that are at the top of this programming. One of them, I can't remember his name. He's currently Trump's body man. He is the absolute biggest asshole you'll ever see. He runs a TikTok for their version of, it's not Grindr, whatever, Match.com, The Right Side or something like that.
Oh, like Christian Mingle or that kind of thing.
Oh, it's the right stuff. It's the right stuff.
Yes, exactly. Yes, John McKenzie. He has literally said women shouldn't have the right to vote. Literally said it out loud, laughing as he did so. Women should not have the right to vote.
So this Project 2025 entraps women because it wants to make contraception illegal or inaccessible.
Yes. So a big thing is they want to enforce the Comstock Act. And so that's the idea of we're going to heavily prosecute anyone who sends or receives contraceptives or abortive pills, right, nationwide. So it's basically if you're trafficking these pills across state lines. So it's this idea of depending on where these contraceptives come from, right? They're going to be no, we're going to very narrowly interpret this to be that this can't happen, right? That you can't access this contraception.
And that means your pharmacy getting contraceptive pills in the mail might not happen. So you could go to the pharmacy and not be able to access pills, right?
Yeah, if how they're getting them is through the mail service. I'm not an expert in the Comstock Act, but that's how I'm understanding it.
And for people who do get their pills delivered, sometimes that has to do with what your insurance will cover. So it's another way of keeping you from being able to access things.
So we're not allowed to have contraceptives anymore. certainly no abortions. I mean, the Project 2025 supports a federal abortion ban.
Under the argument, it's not healthcare. It is not healthcare, right? And so it cannot be covered. Never mind the fact that one of my dearest, oldest, best friends in the world that I've known since kindergarten just had an ectopic pregnancy and had to have an abortion in order to save her own life, because it's literally a matter of time before that tube will burst. The child cannot live, the tube will burst, and she will die. But that's not healthcare. It's not healthcare to save her life.
It's not. Women's healthcare isn't healthcare, you see. Or people with a uterus.
I have an older dad who's a boomer, and explaining that there is no such thing as a post-birth abortion was the most frustrating conversation I've ever had. He has been converted. He understands what a late-term abortion actually means. It's not what he thinks it is.
Well, that's not really a medical term, like the later abortions.
Yeah, but that's the rhetoric that my dad's sitting home watching CNN or MSNBC. And again, he is voting. I'm in a swing state, which, it's very important that you get out and vote. But, this is the information they're getting. They don't understand what they're hearing and what that means. Also, Jenny, there's no gender-affirming hormone replacement therapy if you need it. And no, as we said, no contraception at all, even though a lot of people rely on contraception because people with wombs sometimes use it to regulate their periods or their hormones. So I think there is a lot of stuff that they are outlawing that they, once again, don't understand how women's bodies work.
I was on contraceptives all through high school, not having sex, but it was about hormone control and acne medication.
So many people I knew in high school.
Because they don't care why you're using it. If someone else uses it for a reason they don't approve of, nobody gets it. Is that what I'm picking up here?
It's outlawed. That's it. You can't have it.
This episode is brought to you by Cologuard. Do you know what's really scary? Not screening for colon cancer when you turn 45. The Cologuard test is non-invasive, requires no special prep or time off work, and ships right to your door. In just 3 simple steps, Cologuard takes the scare out of colon cancer screening. If you're 45 or older and at average risk, ask your healthcare provider about the Cologuard test. Cologuard is available by prescription only. Learn more or request a prescription today at Cologuard.com/screen.
If Project 2025 was enacted, how would that affect you personally and professionally as an artist and an author?
That's what the big scary unknown is, right? The big scary unknown is because of the very vague way in which they are discussing what they think of in terms of queer identity and how it is obscene and how anything that is queer content, by nature of it promoting queerness, ought to be put under the umbrella of pornography. Right. And so a big thing that they're doing is they're arguing that the porn is getting to the kids in schools. Right? We need to protect the kids from all the porn that's getting into their library systems. Even though libraries, school libraries across the country are we literally don't know what you're talking about. Right? So you have to expand the definition of what porn is. Right? And so that's what they've been doing, of this idea of anything that is transgender content. So anything that's oh, this is a book about 2 boy penguins that want to get married and have a baby penguin. So anything that's LGBT content, no matter if it is pornographic or not, 2 cute penguins going on a journey to adopt a penguin is not pornographic, right? But it is under their labeling, or it could be. And that's what the fear is because you're not being clear. You're not showing us how far you mean to take this. Anything that is queer coded. So whether you're doing children's books, YA fantasies that have elements of queerness in it, the 2 of you wanting to do historical fictions that might have elements of queer characters in them. My stuff is spicy. My stuff is 18 and over. But even if I changed it to the most flirtatious thing being a batting of the eyelashes, because I'm centering queer joy and queer love, it could fall under this banner of pornography and be banned. And not only are they wanting to ban pornography, they are wanting to go after those who sell it and make it and produce it, right? And so that's, again, it's so are you going to go after romance authors? Romance authors sitting in their offices writing cute little hockey romances where 2 people fall in love who both happen to be boys? You're going to come after me? Are you going to come after my publisher? Are you going to come after the libraries that are supporting me? The audio companies that are doing audio translations of my work? Are we all at risk here? And the fact that we don't know scares me. It scares me of like, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, right? That's just me as a professional writing queer content into books. I've seen many other authors saying, well, it's expansive enough. Their definition is expansive enough that it's not just going to be queer content that gets put under this label of pornography. They're just going to put anything. They're going to put anything. So it could be like the whole romance book community could just suddenly be put under this umbrella of pornography, and all of us could have the book thrown at us.
That is terrifying.
Yeah. And so it's the fact of the big unknown of like, I don't know what you're doing. What is your end game here? How far are you going to take this complete false equivalency that queerness is obscene enough to be pornographic, no matter the content. 2 penguins in a cartoon book adopting a baby is pornographic to you because it's queer joy and love and family.
I think that the fear and the vagueness is the point. You can see this already operating where abortion has been made illegal, with doctors afraid to treat women and people with a uterus who have complicated pregnancies because there is, quote unquote, a life exception to abortion bans. But that doesn't work in practice because of how vague it is. So women are bleeding out in parking lots because of this fear and this vagueness. And the vagueness is enough. Like, it's enough to ban the activity without actually having to ban it. So they can be plausibly deniable and just say, oh, well, it's the doctor's fault. It's their fault. The law is clear. But it's not. It is not clear. And that's the point.
Yeah, it's incredibly vague. I ran into the same thing with, teaching, going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, the fact that I'm teaching race and racism, right? The fact that the laws that have been passed, the law on the book in Florida, the Stop Woke Act, it's incredibly vague, right? And so it really is just like, no one's allowed to teach anything in such a way that anyone who's white can be made to feel bad about things that other like white people have done. Like, it's just super vague. It's like, what does that even mean? How is that even, how do you even enforce that in the classroom?
How do you control how people feel?
Yeah. So how am I supposed to control how someone feels about learning about the U.S. invasion and colonization of Hawaii? I'm supposed to control you feeling bad that we did that? Like, it's just ludicrous, right? And so it's the same kind of thing of all of these parents and like parents going out across the country to their school boards and demanding that all queer books be pulled from the libraries because it makes them upset and they don't want their children to read them. And it's like, okay, but the library isn't just for Timmy and Sarah. The library is for all of the children, and their parents would like them to read the Gay Penguin book. Like, you don't get to exist in a world where you are sheltered from being uncomfortable all the time. It's just crazy, this idea of like, oh, woke little snowflakes, liberal little snowflakes. And I'm like, you're crying at a school board meeting over a penguin book.
Over a penguin book that was written to help children understand what it's like when children have different family units, and nobody is enforcing anything. They're just explaining how families work. And it's mind-boggling. I mean, we've had a spate at the moment of quite negative reviews about some of our episodes, particularly a few years ago, we covered gender rebels in the ancient world. People don't like it when we tell them that there have been transgender and queer people since the dawn of time. And I think one of the things that has terrified me is those episodes in particular, we get a lot of people saying, thank you for going back. And Jenny did all the history research and I did the mythology. Thank you for going back and finding me in the ancient world and showing that I existed or someone like me existed. And I think that's so important that we're able to continue to say that this happened and this is not something that's an anomaly of the 20th or 21st century. People have always existed. They've deserved to be here. And they've had huge places of influence in society.
The fact that, transgender has existed as long as cisgender has existed, and gender is a construct, and you can go back and trace that construct and how it was formed in Western history. Like, it's not just that it's a construct that is artificial. It's that you can trace where it comes from in a lot of ways. It doesn't surprise me, but it still surprises me, if that makes any sense, how threatened some people still are today, in the year of our Lord 2024, at the idea of people not conforming to what they consider to be traditional gender roles. Like, that's what so much of this is about.
Like, what do you mean by traditional? Can you define what you mean by traditional? Right? Like, it's absolutely bananas. But yeah, so that's the fact that when I read that, because at first you think like, oh, of course they're going to come after queer people. Of course they are. So that didn't surprise me. It's never surprised me. But when I saw in the mandate for leadership, the specific language of single mothers, and it does make sense. Like, I grew up in a very conservative household. I grew up with my conservative father. And there, another kind of boogeyman in the Republican Party for the longest time is this idea of like that in particular in their minds, that caveat they're putting in there about single mothers, that's policing Black women. To hear my dad say it'd be the idea of like all of these Black women that are strategically having romantic partners to have as many children as they can and then live off the state, right? That's this idea of like all Black women would aspire to be doing that, which is horrendous and offensive and categorically untrue, and like just continue to add in the reasons why that's the worst thing I've ever fucking heard, right? But they believe this. And so one of the things that they're targeting is that they want to roll back protections for single mothers to make it less, in their mind, desirable to choose that avenue. And so anything that's going to be incentive programs for single mothers, they're going to cut those. They're going to cut them off at the legs so that they can disincentivize it, as if that's really what's happening, as if people want to be in these positions, right? It's disgusting and it's horrifying, but to see that language in there and again, be like, how are we not seeing this and understanding exactly what they mean when they're talking about this stuff? It's unconscionable. It's unconscionable.
When we say cutting off programs to help single mothers, what are we talking about?
You can just think of the different incentive programs that exist. There are state level incentives, there are federal incentives, whether it's getting assistance with groceries or getting assistance with housing, getting assistance with school vouchers, different incentive programs that exist to help protect single mothers and keep them from, a big thing is like keep them from having to give up their children, right? So it's like, what can I do? What protections can I get? What support can I get in my time of need so that I can keep these children with me? Because we know, like, again, it's the idea of like, if they actually cared about the family the way they say they do, in their minds, this utopian version of the family is a working father and a non-working mother. In what United States economy is that possible for most of us? Most of us cannot exist that way. For my husband and I, for the first 12 years of our marriage, we both were working 2 jobs each to make our ends meet. And so it's just like, how do you expect to create your utopia if you really want to focus on the family and have a man working and a woman not working? You have to incentivize them being able to do that. You have to provide better childcare services. You have to provide better healthcare services. You have to provide paternity and maternity leave. You have to do all of these things that would create a system where that's possible. You have to provide housing that we can actually afford. For so many people, the reason they're both having to work is because you literally can't afford to live in a house. You can't rent it. You can't buy it. So you both have to work, and you're just working yourself into the ground. It's just like, what utopia are you living in that you think it can be 2 people in a household with children and one of them works and the other one doesn't? And then so you're going to take single mothers that are trying to do it on their own and cut them off at the legs? It is ludicrous.
The entrapment, I just want to trace the entrapment here because this is another aspect of it. No contraception, no abortion, no fault divorce, including, as J.D. Vance specifies, if your marriage is violent, and no support if you do manage to leave an abusive spouse with your kids. So this is full-on entrapment. They don't want to support people. They don't want to support families. They want to entrap specifically women and femme people in these situations. It's coercion.
Sounds great, doesn't it?
Let's all vote for that.
But by the by, remember, they don't want women to vote. They would like to see the 19th Amendment repealed. So don't bother voting for it. They're gonna fix that too.
Well, I mean, our little brains can't handle the vote. We can't figure out what to do with our bodies. We should not be working. We can't run any businesses or be successful. Why should we vote? We should just go back to, I don't know. I'm waiting for them to be like, and women who are hysterical, in quotation marks, we should just be able to just put them away in asylums and absolutely no questions asked.
Can we talk a little bit about women voting in Project 2025?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what has been so upsetting for me is when you look at all of this rolling out. Again, it's been decades. So you look at it rolling out at the state level and you look at it rolling out now the different federal policies and you see how many, overwhelmingly it's white women, right? The idea that, do you have some BIPOC people that are voting Republican? Absolutely. Absolutely you do. That has always been the case, right? But when you're looking at women in particular, the white women that carry the vote, right? They have been so central within the Republican Party platform is building this out and creating a space for them, keeping them in the fold, right? And so for me, it's just been like, what has happened? What has happened? How are we so bamboozled into thinking that this is good for us, right? And so then you have to dig into all of these layers. That's where Christian evangelicalism comes in, right? And you have to look at how are we brainwashed? How are we manipulated by these different power centers, whether it's at the church or through the government, that are making us think this is in our best interest, that this is going to be good for us, right? And that women keep voting for it. I know women in my life and my family who keep voting for it. And it's just like, it boggles the mind. It's so upsetting to think, like, to go back to, you're voting your rights away. You're voting your rights away. Make it make sense. I feel like if they actually knew, if they actually understood, if they could walk through these pieces like we're doing and say, let's go through what it means to be completely, utterly entrapped in a system of patriarchy that does not serve you, and you're voting for it, it's upsetting, right? It's upsetting and it's, I don't know. And so that's where I'm just like, look, I have this platform. I reach a lot of white women with my platform. Like BIPOC women, they don't need me. They don't need me. They don't need my support. They don't need me to be sitting here talking to them about how fucking scary this is. They have centuries of understanding of what this is. They know what this looks like. They know how to vote.
They've been sounding the alarm this whole time.
They have been sounding the fucking alarm. They have for decades, for generations, they have been sounding the alarm. It's time to listen to them, frankly. White women need to listen to our non-white women friends, right? They are sounding these alarms. They have been sounding these alarms. It's reaching a point, and that's what I feel like is so scary for me. It's reaching a point where it's almost too late. Because each success they get at the state level, each success they get at the federal level, packing the courts the way that they have, Jen, as you mentioned, packing the Supreme Court the way that they have, the fact that they got those justices in, what they were able to do with Roe v. Wade, like it's just, we're reaching this point where it really does start to feel like it's almost too late. We have to correct this course. And the way that we're going to correct this course is voting. Voting in your local elections, voting in your state elections, voting for your school boards, right? Get these Moms for Liberty out of the school boards. Vote and talk about it. Like, we need to talk about it. That's where this fear is coming from me. If it feels like, oh my God, it's almost too late. Right there. We're right on the edge. If they're able to sit on podcasts and laugh about revoking the 19th Amendment as if there should be no repercussions, that's just something we're allowed to laugh about and talk about as if it should be a thing. Ladies, it's almost too late. They are losing all fear of us, right? They are losing all fear that we are going to take our power back from them. They are too cavalier now, is how I'm feeling. That JD Vance can just be like, oh, it's like changing shoes. Like, they are too cavalier. They should be afraid of us and our voting power, but we have to understand what the stakes are.
That is why we're doing this. Like, people need to know and they need to vote.
Instagram teen accounts have automatic protections for what teens see and who can contact them, plus time management tools. And Instagram will continue adding built-in safety features to help create age-appropriate experiences. Learn more about teen accounts and Instagram's ongoing work to protect teens online at instagram.com/teen accounts.
Emily, what scares you the most about Project 2025?
I think what scares me the most is when I hear people say, "That's crazy. That's crazy. That would never happen." That's what scares me the most, because it makes me understand just how successful they've been, that it's already fucking happening. It's already happening. And so it's the classic, like, what is it, the little adage or whatever of like the how to kill a frog. You don't put a frog into a pot of boiling water, it'll hop right out. You put it into lukewarm water and then you turn the stove on, you turn the heat up, right? And so it's this idea like we are sitting in this pot and the water is hot, right? And people are like, "Emily, that's crazy. They're not going to boil us alive in this pot. We're in the pot. The heat is on and they keep turning it the fuck up. They keep turning it up. And you're telling me that's crazy?" You're telling, and so that's what scares me the most is when the dissonance that's there and how you attempt to tackle that dissonance of it. It just makes you feel all over again how far we have to go to get this message out. It's like, if you're telling me that's crazy, that's how far away I am from reaching you, from you understanding how dire this is. If we're starting from the position of you think it's not possible, that's fucking scary.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and I might be. A lot of this is going to be, it's about, the federal government having power, but also devolving power for like how money is spent on certain things to the states. And in particular, the concern about that is if you live somewhere like New York, where there are many more programs to help single mothers and families, and then you come somewhere like Florida or North Carolina, the states don't have those protections. They're not mandated by the federal government any longer to have any of that stuff. So they cut those programs to the bone. And I'm thinking a lot of times the reason that single mothers are receiving benefits and help is because, number one, it's too expensive to put your children in childcare. You would literally just be working to pay off them being in childcare. Number two, a lot of people in general, particularly single mothers, take advantage of a lot of the programs that provide breakfasts and hot meals to children. Breakfast usually allows them to drop them off earlier, which helps single parents in general work better hours so they can bring home more money for their family. The way that this would work is they could cut and gut those programs, which would negatively impact single mothers and single parents in general and keep them from receiving any sort of equity or parallel with a couple or anyone else.
Yeah. It's the idea of like the entrapment, right? We're going to entrap you into the most controlled box we can fit you in. There's no way out. A box with no lid, a box with no windows or doors. We will trap you, and you'll want it because your Christian values will tell you this is the most that you can aspire to in this life, is to be in the box, right? That's where the Christianity, the evangelicalism has to come in and say, you want to be in the box. This is the dream, is to be in the box, to be a wife and to be a mother and to be a homemaker and to support your family. The box is your dream. It has to work on all of these levels.
Yeah. And then shame you for being in that box, but there's no way out of that box.
Which is not to say that some people don't choose to do that, but it has to be a choice. Has to be a choice.
Has to be a choice.
Do you have anything else you want to add?
Oh, goodness. I feel it's like I've let out a lot of steam today.
Your morning venting session.
Yeah, no, it's a lot. You carry it inside you. You carry the weight of this. You carry, it's the same thing of, my gosh, doing 15 years of doing university teaching, first as a student and then as a professor. And to see this and to see, like, I think the hope, like maybe it could be useful to end with a little bit of hope, right? Because you're like, what scares me? And it's like, it is fucking scary. It is fucking scary. But the hope is, when I've been in the classroom and when I've been able to see students, the glimmer of hope is the curiosity is there. That I have students that even as we can feel like there is such an indoctrination movement here in the US to think like the US is the best country that ever was. The US is, the greatest. Everyone should aspire to be like us. We have a perfect government. We have a flawless, right? All of these kind of myths that build out a sense of nationalism of the US being the best place ever, right? The students that I had in my classroom, the curiosity was there. They weren't ready to believe the lies anymore, right? They wanted to know more. And so I think as much as people want to feel like with Trumpers, like the MAGA are just, they're dead to us, right? There's no getting them back. I don't necessarily believe that's true. You're not going to get them by telling them they're stupid or uneducated or in a cult or in the, all of these things that you see a lot of this rhetoric. That's not how you're going to get them. But you could get them in these quieter conversations. You could get them talking about, let's just talk about it. Let's just talk about what Project 2025 is. Let's walk through these pieces like we have just done. This took us an hour, right? It's an hour of your time, but we literally walked through the entire Project 2025's plan to put women into a box and keep us there. We can have these conversations and people can be receptive to them. And so I think to walk away from this and feel like there's no hope is not right. But it's the way that we talk to people. It's the way that we have to humanize and we have to be empathetic and we have to be understanding, even as you can feel like, how am I being empathetic with someone who supported January 6th, But it's like, God, there's still a person. There's still a person in there. There's still a woman that deserves the rights that I would like to have protected for myself, and I want them protected for her too. I want them protected for all people. And so you have to find that humanity and you have to believe that they can learn. You have to believe that they can take information they had, get this new information and update their way of thinking, It's not an easy process. It's not a smooth process. There are going to be people that you feel like, I can't reach this one. But it's just like, don't beat your head against the wall. Move on to the next one. Maybe you'll reach that next one. It's not, it can feel hopeless. And that's what I've really been trying to battle with these past, several months, several years. I think one of the toughest moments in the classroom, I was teaching, it was a politics of genocide class, right? So it's like, this was active. This was when everything in Ukraine was starting up. And so it became kind of a case study issue, right? And I had a student come in, white guy, college age, surfer bro, white guy, came into the class and was like, are you taking attendance today? Because I left the beach for this. And it just hit me in the face as I'm sitting there with my syllabus of the day, my class notes ready to go as we're talking about fucking genocide. And he comes in his board shorts and is like, you better take attendance today. Because I would occasionally take attendance. Like, I left the beach for this. And I was like, no, I'm not taking attendance. Sit down and learn something. It's just like, that's where we're at with some people, right? And so it can feel very disheartening of like, doesn't give a fuck about learning about genocide of other humans, what humans do to other humans, but it's like, that's not all of them. So you can have those moments and it can feel very disheartening. And I'm sure we've all had those political moments with a parent or with a friend or with someone that we work with. And you can feel like, oh, it's hopeless. But there's always going to be those others that you can reach.
I've had these conversations with my dad where he starts off saying, I'm a conservative. And then I actually have sat down and broken down his beliefs. I'm like, but you're for women's rights. You're for personal choice. You're for legalized weed. You're for gay people being allowed to be married. You like your Medicare and your Social Security. Like, how are you conservative? I think a lot of times you have to meet people and try and interrogate their beliefs a little bit. And like, as you said, some you're never going to reach. But my dad is now, he knows where to vote and who not to vote for. And not just because I told him, but because he's actually looked at his beliefs and been able to figure out where he lines up with. He's always thought he was a big C conservative. And now he realizes he's not at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a process. And what's important too is like, it can be a kind of painful process. It can be there's almost a mourning process, right? Of like, I have voted Republican in past elections. I was registered Republican the first time I ever registered to vote. When I was old enough to vote, I registered Republican. I lived in Kentucky. Everyone I knew was Republican. Like, that's what you did, right? I have voted Republican in the past. I have a commendation from the state. From my work, I interned with a Republican congressman. Like, I've been there literally, my partner has been there literally. He's still registered Republican, but he doesn't vote Republican because he cannot with his conscience, knowing what he knows, understanding the way that politics works, he cannot vote for the party as it is now. He cannot vote for it. Because he understands, but there's a grieving that goes into that. And he's talked about that. Like, he was one of the members of college Republicans at his university. There's a grief that's there too. And I think we need to understand with the Republican Party at large, not all of them actually are Trump supporters or in that MAGA camp. There are Republicans that understand that their party has been hijacked by this cult of personality, right? And so there's space there as well to reach those Republicans of like, God, just help us, vote blue so that we can shift this needle and you can get him out and then fix your party. Like, just give us this space to get past the chaos of all of this. Let's put it back in its Pandora box and then let's work on what comes next.
I think that's so true. I think there's a large sense of identity that some people place on their politics, and also particularly with the Republican Party, having been now a very, very lapsed Catholic. I understand when I started to feel very differently about the religion I grew up in. Like, there was a lot of grief I had about realizing like this was not something that I was able to believe in or be complicit with based on the stuff that I knew, going forward about the religion and the way in which people were treated. And you do have to come to terms with it. And sometimes when you're having these conversations, you may find someone at the beginning of that process and they may be tricky to deal with, shall we say, but I do think it does go in their brain and it helps to have the conversation to start moving them in that direction.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been so helpful, and we both really appreciate you taking the time to do this for us. We really think this is meaningful, and we hope that this is doing our part to move that needle.
Thanks so much for having me. I think it's important that we're having these conversations. I think it's so important, right? It's so important. And like we said, like, this took us an hour. Like, just listen for an hour as we paint this picture for you, right? And vote according to your conscience. Like, yeah.
Where can people find you? Where can they find your amazing video series that goes into more detail on this, and your books and other places that people might want to look for you online?
Yeah. So as far as if you want this kind of side of me, of like the professor hat is on Emily version of me, I have been posting some videos. The easiest way to find them is if you go to my TikTok. I have a playlist that I'm just calling Professor Emily, and that's where I'm just kind of putting out all of this different stuff. I've done things on the Stop Woke Act. I've done things on critical race theory, even, because that's a big piece of this too, is understanding like, what even is it? Because Republicans can't tell you. I guarantee you they can't tell you. They do not know what it is, even as they are passing legislation. I know because I'm literally a professor, a university teacher of the topic, right? So I made a video about it. So those are all on TikTok. I have been posting some of them to Instagram as too, but they're the most organized over on TikTok within that playlist. But yeah, otherwise, like when I'm not having an existential crisis over the state of democracy in this country, I'm writing romance novels. You can find me. I'm on Instagram. I'm on TikTok. I have a Facebook group. I'm open. I'm available. If people have other questions or other topics they want me to dive into for like my TikTok series, just post it, even like in the comments of one of the videos, be like, hey, can you talk about this? I've been checking those pretty regularly and making more content based on what people want to know about. I want to make myself available. I'm kind of a loose cannon at this point. I'm not affiliated with the university, but I joke that it's like, you can take the professor out of the university. You can't take the professor out of the professor. Like, I still have my PhDs. I still know what I'm talking about. Even as I'm writing hockey romances, I can also talk to you about democratic backslide, authoritarianism, and the rise of populist governments.
Because we're living it right here.
we're living it. We're living it. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, I can wear both those hats.
I'm just going to say for our listeners out there who are overwhelmed and a little bit scared of the world, I heartily recommend Emily's hockey series. It's her Jacksonville Rays series. I've had a rough 2 years, and those books brought me so much joy. They're queer romances. There's another one coming out in September, and both Jenny and I are super looking forward to Emily's new romantic fantasy that's coming out in December. I really encourage you to have these conversations, and then if you need to recharge, I recommend the hockey romance series.
Thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you whenever we see you next.